It's, okay,
Does somebody have their TV on?
yeah,
Could they turn it off?
there we go.
Thank you.
It's Monday, May 24th, 5:31 PM. This is a joint Republican and Democratic caucus. We have with us tonight Kevin McCarthy, myself, Paul Arena, Jim Webster, Angela Fellers, Gene Crosby, Joe Hoffman, Aaron Booker, Dorothy Red, John Butita, David Kelly, Burt Girl, Brad Lindmark, Fred Westcott, Dave Tassoni, Keith McDonald, Jaime Salgado, and Angie Gorel. Are there any board members that I missed? And we have his guests, Mr. Larry White, Dave Rickert, and Chairman Shirelli. There might be someone else on there who I don't recognize. Anyway, that all? Okay. So going over the agenda, Crosby, you have the invocation and pledge this week. There's no awards, public hearings, or public participation or presentations. We have appointments for the, how do you pronounce that? School Cemetery of Pecatonica Board. These are all reappointments. John Burns, Thomas Doherty, Karen Donahoe, Carol Diane Parker, Stephen Burns, and Marianne Doherty. Nope, more. David Gill, Timothy Gill. Also, we have the Zoning Board of Appeals, Brian Erickson, and the Harlem Cemetery Association, James Lyford. Are there any comments or questions on any of those appointments?
I have a question. I think, is that one for community action supposed to come up Thursday?
Yes, we have that on the unfinished business, so there'll be a vote on that
Okay.
this month, or this week, I mean.
I do have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead, Mr. McDonald.
In the future, it'd be great if they could say during the appointments if these are paid positions and how much.
Okay. I think we can probably, Mr. Chairman Shirelli, can that information be available for Thursday?
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, we can have that on Thursday. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. I have seen in the past, and I do have it in one of my files, of every appointed board position that the county has input or appointment towards, and it lists the terms and the pay scale for all of those. So Chairman Shirelli, if we could hunt that up in the board office, get it updated and sent out, I think that'd help everybody with those questions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Any additional comment on the appointments? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. So first standing committee is Finance Committee. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has one item to look at. It's going to be laid over. It's updating the ordinance establishing property assessed clean air energy known as the PACE program. There's some language in there, some cleaning up from finance lien tool. That's obviously there's some changes to that ordinance. It's going to be laid over, but believe we have some guests in here regarding that can provide some more clarity regarding the changes that are there. But before I do that, there are some two other items on unfinished business which have been tabled. So I'm assuming unless there's any other changes, they will continue to be showing up as unfinished business. And those are the Senate bills, obviously. that we have been tabling for going on further and further. So that's probably the same motion's going to happen unless there's more information. But I just wanted to bring that up prior to having the PACE presentation there. Go ahead, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On those two items, on the legislative items, what I think I'm going to request is that we just, and I talked to Mr. Thompson today about the trying to determine the correct parliamentary procedure, but we'll just table them finally now. The one addressing the mental health board has passed both houses, and the other one is on second reading in the Senate. The one on the tax trustee program, last time I had reported about the amendment that was had been filed on it, and I said that it was changing the rate from 12, where they had amended it, down to 9. But what I clarified later is it would be 9 every 6 months, whereas before it had been amended from 18% every 6 months to 12 every year. Now it's the final language would change the law from 18% every 6 months to 9% every 6 months. I think, we had these moving forward on the agenda so we could have the opportunity to weigh in on it. This was the only real mechanism we had as a county to do that. I think after this legislative session, we should do something to codify that the chairman can file positions on these bills without us going through this process, because this is too cumbersome and to react to the way the legislature operates and changes so frequently. So that's the update on those two things. We'll kick it back to Mr. Rickard now. If you could introduce our guests who could maybe give us a little insight into the change, why the change to the PACE program is necessary.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Larry White. He's the counsel for the Illinois Property Assessed Clean Energy Organization. They've approached us with a request to revise and update our PACE ordinance. And that's what you see before you on the Finance Committee, and he can provide more clarity on that issue. And without further ado, Mr. Larry White.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that introduction. Members of the county board, it's a pleasure to meet you. In addition to myself, well, first of all, I'm a municipal bond lawyer at the law firm of Chapman and Cutler. Our role on the PACE financings is to render an opinion as counsel to the county that any borrowing under the program is legal and that the assessment contract that the county will enter into with the property owner is valid under Illinois law. I have with me my law partner, David Sykes, who has a background in PACE as well, and Mark Caucus, who just appeared on the screen. He's with the Illinois Energy Conservation Authority, which is the program administrator for the county for PACE borrowings. Maybe I should just take a moment to remind everyone how PACE works. This is a voluntary assessment program where a property owner can work with a lender, who we call a capital provider, approach the county and say, we'd like to do a borrowing through this program for an energy conservation project, a permitted project under the Illinois statute. The county's role is to put the assessment in place because the county has taxing power. Obviously, the property owner and the lender don't have their own taxing power. So there's a contract that's put in place between the county and the property owner. We call it an assessment contract, under which the assessments are levied the same way you would levy your normal property taxes. And that assessment will go on the property tax bill. Because the lender is providing the funds for the program, we need a borrowing structure where the county assigns over its rights to receive those payments, the assessments, to the lender. And so that's done either through what we call a simple assignment, or we're now using an updated structure that borrowers and lenders favor, And that's by the county issuing a note. It's not a note in the sense that the county has any of its own credit on the line. It doesn't affect your credit rating, your debt limit. It's just a note where you under the terms of the note, you promise to pay the note back from proceeds received from the assessments. And the owner of the note happens to be the lender, what we call the capital provider. So the ordinance that was adopted in February didn't provide for this note structure. And it has become kind of the chosen structure in the market in Illinois. And so we're back before you today to ask that this new ordinance be adopted, and it would replace the prior ordinance. So I think I'll stop there and see if there are any additions or questions.
Mr. White, I have the first question. If the property owner fails to make their tax payment, how does that affect the county's obligation on the note?
The county's obligation on the note is only to make payments from those taxes received. So it would have no impact at all on the credit of the county. What would happen in that situation is that the regular property tax collection process would kick in. And that would be the case whether we did a simple assignment or a note. And the county, in its role as a collector of taxes, would pursue the property owner and eventually sell the property if need be in order to make good on any overdue taxes, including the PACE assessments.
Okay, thank you. Who else has questions? Mr. Butita.
Thank you. I guess I had a couple of questions. One was the borrowing limit of $500 million. It seemed like a lot. I mean, I don't even know if we have that much assessed value in our county now. But why is that number so high? But I guess more importantly, my other question is that I wonder if we could be given, and maybe this is a question maybe to Mr. Shirelli, we'll get a flavor of the type of loans, what's going to be done with this money, what energy efficient things are going to be done with the borrowed money, and how is this going to benefit the public at large. So I guess we have something in the pipeline, or I don't know that you can divulge names or companies, but maybe if we could be told exactly what this money is being spent for, we'd have a better understanding of why we're borrowing money and how this works.
Sure. Why don't I take the question on the 500 million, and then maybe I'll ask Mark Pikus to speak to the specific project that's in the pipeline and what the other projects may look like. The 500 million is not set in stone. It's not statutory. We needed to put some number in as an overall maximum. We can use a lower number, whatever the county's comfortable with. Each borrowing that happens, and most of these borrowings are going to be small. They're going to be $500,000. We have a project now that's $1.5 million, and that will count towards the overall limit. It probably would make sense, or will make sense, to go back to the county board in a couple of years to re-ratify the program. And if the board feels that the number is too high, we can certainly lower it. It's just the number we've been using in different counties for when ordinances have been adopted, but there's no magic at all to that number.
Hi, this is Mark Pikus. As far as the question on, the product, these are voluntary assessments, and this is where property owners want to improve their property with clean energy improvements like a roof, windows, insulation, solar panels. It's to improve the property in an energy efficient way. And as far as when you did mention that the county borrowing money, that the money comes from private sources. The county is more or less just a conduit.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Butita?
No, thank you.
Mr. White, I'm sure. Oh, go ahead, Angie.
I would like to know, if I only have $100,000 house, how much of improvements would you allow me to make on that house? What's the
Yeah, the state law says you can't borrow more than 25% of your appraised value or assessed value, whichever is greater.
okay?
So in your case, it would be 25,000. And I think you mentioned the word house. This is only for commercial.
Well, that clears up a lot of things too. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't apply to residential at all. Other than multifamily units, multifamily projects of 5 units or more would be eligible, but this is not intended and it's not authorized under Illinois law for residential purposes.
Very good. If any of those were actually to go into foreclosure and there's still, let's say, half of the loan to pay back, do you just dissolve the loan or do you continue on with it? What happens?
It travels with the property. So the assessments remain in place and subsequent owners would be responsible for the taxes. The same way a subsequent owner would be responsible for prior delinquent ad valorem property taxes.
Thank you.
Ms. Fellers?
That was my question. I just wanted to clarify whether or not the county was like a cosigner or if we were just a pass-through agent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to pass through, the role of the county is to put the assessment in place and then after the fact, if there are any delinquencies, to use the normal property tax collection process.
Okay, so the county is not a guarantor in any way on this program?
Not at all. There are no funds at the county at risk at any point in any of these transactions.
Thank you, Mr. White.
My pleasure.
Mr. Arena, I got a question.
I'll go ahead, Mr. Salgado.
Yeah, so this is for Mr. White and company here. Do you guys have any historical history based on, properties or of this loans that actually have gone belly up? Is there any history behind that? What's the likelihood from that perspective? And obviously, if there are any benchmarks that you guys are seeing within across, whether it's counties, the state, during this PACE program?
The program is very new in Illinois. It's only about 3 years old. There are no delinquencies at all, but it's still very, very new. I think maybe I'll ask my law partner, David Sykes, to speak more generally. He has done a lot of PACE work in other states and can talk about the delinquency rates.
The delinquency rates are for PACE in general are actually pretty low. I only know of a few workouts on commercial PACE transactions. One of them being a very large hospital in California, where the PACE assessments worked as planned and were paid off in connection with the sale of the hospital. Actually, aside from that, we don't have a whole lot of data about PACE assessment delinquencies because there aren't many. And to the extent there have been some, it hasn't gone into foreclosure. That is the one bankruptcy workout that I'm aware of for a CPACE deal in the U.S.
I did have a question.
As a follow-up, if I may.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Finish, Mr.
So
Salgado.
on the other side of the coin, is there any information about, about energy saving taxing dollars and the revenue generations that from these PACE programs that these businesses come across? Do you have any information regarding that within the state of Illinois, county across? Just to give a perspective, I mean, from my perspective, I think this is a good alternative for capital, especially for businesses that want to come in and to do something with a renovation or any buildings that are, obviously could use some energy efficient items there. So it's a plus, but I just would like to see if there is any information out there. I mean, I could maybe visit the PACE website or something like that, and they might have some information. From your knowledge, is there anything out there that you can share with us?
This is Mark Pikus. Are you referring to like alternative financing sources? Or is this something having to do with PACE?
It has, from my perspective, obviously, it's like the language similar to PACE, you know, as a tool advantage for financing, how it's impactful from a revenue generating and actually bringing businesses into these counties versus those that don't have the PACE program. And that's what I'm kind of trying to see if there's any kind of data out there that kind of supports that.
Just speaking in general, I think, I've been with PACE for about 8 years, and when I've dealt with many of the municipalities for PACE financing, the one thing they've always said is that it's a economic development tool that is very useful, for their constituents. The ability to upgrade their buildings with 100% financing when maybe they don't have working capital, at their disposal. And then you have this program that allows them to fix it up, and it kind of generates, jobs and gets, contractors involved. I mean, that's a generality, but I'd be happy to, work with you offline to show you more data. There are sites through Pace Nation that might be able to answer your question a little bit better. They do a lot more data collecting on the energy savings component.
Thank you.
Okay, we got Mr. McCarthy, and then Chairman Shirley had a question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems like this PACE program, I like it. I think there's a lot of benefits to it, especially when it comes to companies and so forth, and including the startups. And I know you mentioned about some companies possibly, well, I shouldn't say possibly, but about the belly up, I'll use that term that was used early. So if something were to happen to one of the companies that we give out this loan, and they go under or they shut their doors, is the county responsible for any of these payments? I just want to double check and just to make sure, just to throw that out there so we're not overlooking.
Yeah, the county is just lending its taxing power to the transaction. The county is not standing behind any loan. There's no dollars of the county at risk at any point. County's not responsible for any of the fees. The property owner is. And so really the county, there's some staff time involved, and there is work on the back end to make sure that the assessment appears on the property tax bill and is collected twice a year with property taxes, but there's no financial risk to the county in any of these transactions.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. I just want to reassure maybe others out there that are thinking like mine as myself. Thanks.
Chairman Shirley, did you want to interject something?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Arena, for allowing me to speak. So 2 parts to Mr. McCarthy's question and the answer that was given. I know the county can receive a fee, charges a fee for that obligation for the tax assessment. So that helps offset any labor costs. And I believe the treasurer also receives a fee for doing that. Am I correct, Mr. White, in that?
You are correct. Mark, do you have the specifics of the fees?
Yeah, I believe the county passed a upfront fee of 1% that goes to the county immediately. And then I believe each tax payment is $200. So if it's collected twice a year, it would be $400 for their role in helping service it and put it on the tax bill.
Thank you for that clarification for everybody to know that. Second, to Mr. Salgado, the current deal that we have, that's our first PACE project, it's about $1.5 million of funding, capital funding for this energy, renovations. I don't know specifically, I don't have it on hand, what actually is going to be done with that. Is it the roof or solar panels, windows? I believe it has to do with all of the, maybe some of the above and not maybe all of the above. But speaking to the developer, for not having this PACE, this deal probably wouldn't happen because he was not able to fill that gap with other funding. So this PACE deal really has created the economic growth for the deal that's going to be announced shortly once this is adopted. That's why I had spoken to Ms. Arena. I said time is of the essence on this because they already have backhoes and they're already doing some preliminary work on that land. So it's going to be a $6 million development deal in downtown Rockford. And I'm very proud to say for PACE, we were able to utilize this economic tool to make this reality. So just wanted to give you that information, Mr. Salgado.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chairman Shirley. Ms.
Thank
Fellers.
To carry on what Chairman Shirley has just said, I've also spoken with the developer and understand, as he does, that this development would not have happened without the PACE financing. I see this as an additional funding source for development. It sends a signal that we're open for business in Winnebago County. If we have any opportunity to provide ease of capital for developments, especially in areas where the PACE program is compatible with historic tax credits, river district credits, TIF district, et cetera, I think we should get out of our own way. We even have fees to offset any of the costs to the county. We know that we don't have any kind of financial exposure or financial risk. This seems like something that should pass easily. Is there a reason that we're tabling it and not bringing it for a vote on Thursday?
Well, we're not tabling it. It's part of our rules of procedure that an ordinance after read in is laid over. So because this is time sensitive, I was under the impression we were going to suspend the rules on this to vote on it on Thursday. But it's just our procedures.
Okay,
Yeah,
great, thank you.
Yeah, and just for clarification, this is new language that is sort of an amendment to what we already passed in the past. It's just adding that financial tool for it. And that's why we're having this discussion now, because there was some confusion on the liability aspect of who would take over, who would pay what if the business failed and, the loan was out there, who would be liable. So I think there was some confusion on that. That's why we had Mr. White come in and some other folks in company to kind of give a little bit more information on that to, put some uncertainty when we had our finance committee. But overall, this is just like I said, it's almost like an amendment, additional language that was not in the original PACE program that we passed. So I think everybody's on board on that. I think that's where we're going in this direction, but I think it's good discussion. So, we can obviously market it as much as we can to encourage business development.
For clarification, we are speaking about the redlined version, correct? The updated version. That's what we're voting on.
Right.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I have a question, Mr. White.
Yes.
Your firm provided the original ordinance that we passed earlier this year, right?
There were different forms floating around. I actually don't know for sure that our firm prepared the original ordinance. We have run a red line, so I could see the changes. And I'm familiar with both ordinances, and really the substantive difference between the two is this note structure that we're going to utilize for the upcoming project and for subsequent projects.
Okay, so even though the change from the red line version appears extensive, substantively, it's the note provision is the only real.
That's the one large substantive change between what was adopted before and the current version, correct?
So we've already approved this once, and then just for clarification so that I understand, the loan being given for the improvements to the property is a lien on the property that's paid through tax assessments. If the property becomes tax delinquent and actually goes all the way through the process of a tax sale, that's getting that tax deed on the property wipes out that lien, right? Just like it would a mortgage.
David, do you want to speak to what happens at different points in the process?
Absolutely. So the question was the tax lien, whether or not it's wiped out in the foreclosure.
No, not in a tax sale. So if a property becomes tax delinquent and it goes through our trustee program, say, and we take possession of the property, and then we eventually go through and get a deed for the property, there's no, all the liens are extinguished, right? So just like if it was a mortgage of any other lien on the property, it's wiped out for us to dispose of the property then?
So the intent of the liens on the property, the assessments, are that they would not be extinguished by the foreclosure, and they would be assumed by the eventual purchaser of the property, either through negotiating a payment with capital providers or by assuming the payments for the improvements in future years. So the intent is not that it would be extinguished like a mortgage. So PACE liens in general don't accelerate. In other words, there's not a point in time where, as a result of a default, all of the PACE lien becomes due and gets paid off, as would happen with a mortgage or something along those lines. Instead, what happens is each year's payment attaches to the property and is levied, and then the future year's payments are then protected, but not becoming due until the years in which they are.
So a property that has, say, $100,000 loan for a PACE improvement goes through the tax program, and the county's trustee program gets possession of that property. When we go to sell the property, the new buyer would have to be willing to assume that debt,
That's correct.
or the county would stay in possession of that property.
And when the county's in possession of it, obviously there isn't any debt.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Obviously, the county can't be made to pay the debt, but the protections against this are generally in the types of properties that are financed with commercial PACE. First, you have the value limits. And second, the capital providers underwrite obviously the success of the business that owns the property, but also the likelihood that you're going to end up with something that sounds a lot more like a brownfield or something that's really run down. Those are typically not the properties that are getting commercial PACE liens attached to them. So there shouldn't be, not saying it's impossible, there shouldn't be a scenario where someone's not willing to at least bid the amount of the taxes, either due or to become due for the property. It should be the smaller piece of the value.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. I had to find my button. Yeah, I think that when Kevin McCarthy spoke there, I think that was important for what he said there, to affirm that the county is not going to be on the hook if one of these projects with money was expended to goes belly up, as we say, whatever, that the taxpayers, we need to protect the taxpayers. It's important to know that we, the county, wouldn't be on the hook to pay that off. Because this has happened in the past before, when the county has loaned money, when we were like third in line for a loan. And so there was so much money owed that the first two got paid off, and the county was left with some chicken feed. It wasn't nearly enough to cover what we loaned them. So at any rate, that was important, and thanks for bringing it, Kevin. Now, and it was important too, what Ms. Feller has brought up, because this particular project, you're talking solar or wind or what have you like that, none of these projects would ever get off the ground to begin with if the federal government wasn't using taxpayer monies to give them credits to do this. And so that in itself is costing taxpayers money. And so once again, the taxpayers are being exposed in one sense or another if we don't do our due diligence and be sure that they're not exposed to any payments. And the one thing as I'm listening to all this, I'm wondering, someone is funding this money. You said private folks or someone's coming up with some capital for this. And so if this project did go belly up, I mean, if private funds are in there, they would be the first ones to report their loss, I would think. And so once again, I guess the concern to me would be that if something happened and the project went belly up, are we stuck like we see around the country with big shopping malls that have gone belly up, and they're just a desert out there now and nothing there. And so these were my concerns going into this PACE program, but if
Yeah, so just to address that concern in a little different way. So our law firm's role is to protect the county in this transaction. We're bond counsel to the county. We'll make sure that the correct language is in the note, and then the indemnification provisions so that the county is protected. We represent the county under traditional borrowings, and we take the same level of care on these PACE financings for different reasons. I mean, your traditional borrowings, the county's credit is on the line, but here our role is to make sure that the county doesn't commit to doing anything that isn't capable of doing, and that it's properly indemnified, and that there isn't any financial risk to the county.
thank you. And that's what I wanted to be dead certain of.
Yeah. And then Mark, I think, can speak to who the capital providers typically are and what their process is for, making these loans. They're essentially loans. We call them assessments, but they're really just a loan.
Yes.
Yeah, typically, I mean, they can be any kind of financial institution, but typically in PACE, they are more private sources, not your bank, but your bank can do it. I think it's harder for banks to do this program because of the long-term nature of it. Some of these amortization schedules are 20 to 25 years. And so, these private sources of capital, they underwrite the project just like most real estate transactions. They're trying to make sure that whatever they lend out is repaid back to them based on a functioning business or the real estate value. They don't ever want to be in a position where a lien like your tax bill can't be paid. You'd have something serious would have to really happen at that level. And so, but that's their analysis, and they're underwriting it. They know the risk going in. That's exactly what they do.
Thank you. Was there any further questions, Mr. Webster?
Not at this time, thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. Two things. First of all, I wonder, if somebody's got 100,000 square foot building, does re-roofing it qualify for applying for this kind of loan?
It does, as the program administrator, and through an energy audit, they determine that, and this is not my technical expertise, but there has to be an energy saving component, a degree of quality that makes it qualify for that energy efficiency. If you throw any roof on there and it's not energy efficient, that would not qualify.
So it would have to be like additional insulation or something.
Perhaps.
The second question is, if a property, say somebody goes bankrupt, forecloses on the property, and it's underwater with regard to property tax, that the property is worth less than what the debt is, who's responsible?
Mr. White, can you answer that?
Yeah, I was just going to ask David to talk us through that.
So I was going to say, in a scenario where the property is worth less than the taxes, again, based on the statutory underwriting requirements and also the I guess the aligned interests of the capital providers, I think that scenario is only likely to come up in one where there should be some insurance proceeds to cover the difference. But I would think in that scenario where the property taxes are collectively more than the value of the property, it's hard to say who would eventually end up with the short end of the stick there, but I'm assuming it would be the capital providers. So the lenders would be on the hook for that. It certainly wouldn't be the county. The county's only obligation here is to pay over the money it receives. And your title to the building would be by operation of law. Nobody's, I think, getting some money back in that scenario rather than none would be important. So I think the corner case of a black swan event that takes out all the rest of the value of the building, and there not being any insurance proceeds anywhere, and most of the capital providers require insurance on the property for exactly that reason, would be pretty remote.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Mr. Webster, did I see your hand back up?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Kelly, for bringing that up, because that's a very fair question, an important one as well, because in this county, in Rockford, Illinois, and in Winnebago County in general, we have a lot of properties that are not worth what the taxes are on them. And so, that's why we have so many of those, because the taxes have not been paid for a number of years or what have you. And now the properties themselves aren't worth half of what the tax is. And so that's the shape we're in right now here. So I think Dave brought up a great big point. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Are there any further questions or comments on this proposal? Seeing and hearing none, I thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight and helping us with that explanation. It was very beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Have a good evening. Mr. Salgado, any other comments from finance before we move on?
No, sir, that would conclude our report for Thursday evening.
Thank you. Next up, zoning, Mr. Webster. I think you're on mute, Jim.
Yes, thank you. Okay, zoning, we just have one item to come in before the board, and this is to be laid over. And it deals with Edwards Apple Orchard. And Edwards is operating under special use conditions that they had back in 1990 or 91, so 30 years old. And 30 years ago, the board played kind of fast and loose with zoning, so to speak. And the things that they're doing are not outlined in their special use permit. So this brings it up to speed now. Everything that they're doing will be under the umbrella of this new special use permit here, or updated special use, you might say. And so it sailed through zoning board of appeals with unanimous decision approval on that. And it's one of their shortest meetings ever. And so they saw the value in doing this as well. And this was discovered a couple of years ago when they were going to do, let's see, some kind of construction of some sort or remodel another building, whatever. And then through the research that the staff and the building department has to do on this, they discovered that special use that they'd had all these years didn't cover, the kitchen facilities or whatever. It didn't cover the actual sales. It didn't cover parking. It didn't cover all of the things that they do out there. This will. And so I expect that this is going to be a lightning fast zoning committee meeting Wednesday night. So please, committee members, it's 4:30 at Zoom. So if this meeting takes 10 minutes, that's going to be 5 minutes too long. So read your paperwork that you have. And when this comes before the board, once again, now it's in for a layover. But if you all read your minutes there that you have to go by, and if it comes out of our committee, I think it probably will with the recommendation, and positive recommendation, I think, I hope. And if anybody chooses to suspend, that's fine. And if not, let it lay over. It won't hurt either way. Thank you.
Excuse me, Jim. You
Yes?
also might want to let them know, the board members know, that this is the apple orchard that they own here, Winnebago County on Cemetery Road.
Yes.
Not everyone knows that we have an apple orchard out there on Cemetery.
Yes. So that is correct. So they've been operating, like I said, since at least 1990 or so on this.
Yep.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Economic Development, I don't believe Mr. Billich is here with us. No, Mr. Butita, your vice chair, any information from Economic Development that you'd like to share?
No, there is no report for economic development.
Thank you. Operations and Administrative Committee, Mr. McDonald.
No report. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Works Committee, Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Public Works Committee will bring forth a handful of resolutions this week. First item is a resolution authorizing the award of a bid for bridge deck sealing various locations throughout the county, cost of $27,000 and some change. It's basically a sealer that'll go over concrete decking and preserve the life of those. Second item is a resolution awarding the bid for another patching program, $99,000. This is more in the wake of, I believe, like a rubberized ceiling that'll go on asphalt roads and fill cracks and help with freeze thaw in that manner, help extend the life of some roads. Next item is a resolution authorizing the bid for the 2021 Township Seal Coating Program. That's just basically pass-through funds that the Highway Department administers for the township. Next item is a resolution awarding the bid for bulk rock salt. You'll see in there, the Winnebago County cost is 1.1 million and some change. We go in with some other entities, other townships and municipalities to get that cost down. $76.85 a ton for salt this year. I believe it's a couple dollars a ton less than last year. Next item is a resolution authorizing the execution of an engineering services agreement with Effective Management Decisions LLC to conduct a facility space needs assessment for improvements at the Highway Department's maintenance facility. It's a budgeted item, $34,500. We had a presentation from the gentleman that runs this firm. And basically what it is, for some of you that may not be aware, since my lifetime and then some, the County Highway Department has housed upwards of 75%, 90% of their equipment outdoors in the weather. They've never really had a facility that they could park their, snowplow trucks in, thaw them out. And so this is just gonna, like I say, an assessment on what the grounds could handle and what it would look like, cost, fees, and what we might expect if we decided to do some kind of large building in the future. Final item is a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of McChesney Park and the City of Loves Park for cost sharing for the operation and maintenance of it's basically a river elevation gauge at Latham Road Bridge. This has been in existence for quite some time. McChesney Park and City of Loves Park we're splitting at a third apiece. It's $1,800 a year, our share for a 5-year contract. And there was some cost savings there. And like I said, don't remember which one, McChesney Park or Loves Park, but one of them is a new addition to help pay for that gauge.
Mr. McDonald, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak in support of this river gauge. Being that I live on the river, I can speak to how important the Latham gauge is. That's the gauge that the sheriff uses to make all the decisions, whether the river should be open or closed. We're doing very, very well this year. As a matter of fact, we need some water. It's low, but in years past with all the flooding, a lot of things are going off of how that gauge reads. So I really, really support this. I'm glad that Loves Park and McChesney Parks joined in as partnership. It's gone on for several years, as Mr. Tassoni said. In the future, I don't know if it's operations or through your committee, Mr. Tassoni, there's also a gauge at the dam. And the importance of that gauge is to make sure ComEd is operating the dam in the way which was agreed upon. Currently, that half of that gauge is getting paid by the Rock Rivers Homeowners Association. I think it's important for county and how we regulate the river. So I would look forward to, again, I'm not sure whose committee, if it would be operations or not, but I think the county should be on the hook for the other half of that one, because I feel it is our responsibility to make sure that the dam is getting operated properly to help protect all the homeowners that live along the river. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just speak to that in closing as well, too. And I know you, Mr. McDonald, are very familiar with Mr. Lucas there, who takes care of the barge and knows a lot about the river and the elevations. But yes, and there is another one the county, I believe, maintains out on the Kishwaukee River. City of Rockford maintains a few others. And like I say, they are very important when we head into our spring thaws and our flood season, that if you live on the river or it's part of your district, you know, it's good information to know how high it might crest and when you might expect to go down and things of that nature. So that concludes our report.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Public Safety and Judiciary, Mr. Girl.
No report this evening.
Thank you. Okay, 10 unfinished business. We already talked about the Finance Committee items there that we're going to just table them permanently. Appointments for ones that we can act on now. We have the Community Action Agency, Dorothy Red. The 911 ETSB, Don Carlson. Board of Review, Pamela Cunningham and Jay Douthert. So those are all that we can act on this week. Are there any questions or comments on any of these appointees? Okay, seeing and hearing none. That's it. We got new business. Anybody want to bring up any new business items this week? Okay, should be an easy meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Webster, I believe. Any second? Crosby. All right. All those in favor, please log off.
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone. We'll see you Thursday.
I
Oh, wait, I wanted to say one thing before you leave. I think
Okay.
that's going to be the last one we do by Zoom. So just, we could talk about it, but I think after this, we're going to caucus in person. Just want to give everyone the heads up.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.